Okay, let's make a start. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending where you are in the world. I'm Giuliano Danico, and on behalf of UCL and IPMA, a warm welcome to another global keynote in our Megaproject CEO series. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Beth West, the CEO of East West Rail, connects Oxford and Cambridge, and one of the rare cases of a woman in the position of CEO of a Megaproject globally. And this is something that we are quite proud to highlight and emphasize, and the importance of changing the diversity of the industry globally. If I could say a bit more on that, on behalf of UCL, this is one of the core values and the purpose of why we created the MBA in major infrastructure delivery. And we will, of course, contribute to changing performance in different areas of the industry, but also in those wider, more structural questions and challenges that the industry has. We are on a mission to promote gender balance in infrastructure and leadership positions, and there'll be more initiatives in that perspective in the near future, so stay tuned. Without any further ado, Beth, thanks again for joining us today, for making the time, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Giuliano. It's an honor to be invited and talking to such a broad audience of people. Hello to all those old friends who have joined and supported this endeavor, and to you and those I've not yet met. I hope this lives up to your expectations. And I've said to Giuliano that I'm really happy that the Bartlett School has established this major infrastructure delivery MBA. There's a lot of work that we still have to do in this space and loads for us all to learn. Before we start, I think that I ought to provide you with a health warning. Giuliano has asked me to talk about the leadership and management aspects of my mega project, which I will do. But the health warning comes from the fact that I'm not like the previous mega project CEOs that have spoken to you. And I don't mean that for the obvious reasons of my gender and possibly my funny accent. I mean that because I'm not an engineer or a project manager. I'm an economist, and I've been a Capitol Hill staffer as well as a project finance banker. So I start looking at mega projects in a different way from the usual suspects. And I really care about the money, where it's coming from, and how it's spent. So if you're here for the usual chest out, standing on the bridge of a ship, mega project CEO speech, you'll just have to wait for the next Mark or Simon. Let's start with what is a mega project. I checked with Giuliano to make sure that I'm not off script from the coursework on what is a major project and what's a mega project. The basis of these definitions is a monetary value. So 100 million pounds, dollars, euros is a major project, and over $1 billion is a mega project. And then we talk about complexity and duration, making things into mega or even giga projects. But is the notion of a mega project even helpful? Has the idea of a mega project become self-fulfilling? Have we bestowed upon mega projects unwarranted kudos to demonstrate our self-importance and stroking our egos, therefore driving a growth in mega projects? Even the name is intimidating. To the wider world, it's not helpful, and it seems far removed from their daily lives and pocketbooks. Rounding errors on mega projects are often greater than most people's annual salaries. We have to ask ourselves, do mega projects have inherent value in and of themselves? I think absolutely not. Have we created a monster with projects that are incredibly difficult to get off the ground and even more difficult to complete? We all know that the reputation is for mega projects to be over budget and over time. No one wants this. So what is the role of leadership in taming this mega project monster? Do we even want mega projects? Or do we want to make projects smaller and their duration shorter so they can be easier to deliver? Let's really think about the world we're currently living in. We have an incredibly urgent climate emergency that needs solutions now so that we don't burn out the planet and lose the biodiversity that allows this planet to thrive. The current global pandemic is over, but WHO says the next disease X could result in 20 times more fatalities than COVID. And there's political unrest happening all over the world, which leads to economic turmoil, which then leads to more political unrests. Mega projects don't and can't live in isolation. By their sheer size, scale, and cost, they touch on all aspects of our lives. But before we build the next ones and fluff up our feathers and tell ourselves we're really clever for building this huge, great thing, we need to ask ourselves, why are we doing it? Today, I'm going to talk about the key theme that is the backbone to my leadership of East West Rail and how it influences the project, and the one that I think must drive every other major and mega project that we build, our purpose. With that, I'm going to discuss how our purpose impacts and influences politics, and how critically important our purpose is for what I call building the bank of goodwill for our project. I think it's critical to be able to drive a mega project from beginning to end, and you need to be building this bank of goodwill. Before you think I'm incredibly fluffy and not getting into the hard elements of delivery, I want to talk about planning. And not the planning the planning application side of planning, but specifically about how important it is to get down deep into the step-by-step detail of all of our activities, particularly so we can be agile and adaptable if and when the politics change. And finally, I'll talk about people, how people will deliver our purpose, and how we need to engage with our communities to ensure our mega project actually delivers its outcomes for the very people that is for. So let's start with purpose. And I don't mean management handbook purpose. Oh, we'd better write down our purpose, vision, and mission because we're supposed to. Or, oh, the kids these days need to have a purpose to work here, so we better write something down. The purpose that I mean is that we're going to spend billions of pounds on this project. So we'd better have a really good reason why we're spending this money and why we're impacting our environment and our communities in order to build this. I'm fortunate with East West Rail because our reason for being is very clear. And maybe that's why I work here. But the purpose of East West Rail is to unlock sustainable economic growth between Oxford and Cambridge. That might sound like the trite management handbook purpose that I just talked about. But think about it for a second. When you ask, where else in the world do you have two world-leading universities in such close proximity to each other? You answer by saying, well, in Northern California, you've got Stanford and UC Berkeley within an hour of each other. And in Boston, you've got Harvard and MIT right across the river from each other. And then you realize that you've got two of the most dynamic and innovative places in the world springing up out of these nearby world-class universities. Oxford and Cambridge aren't quite as close together as Stanford and Berkeley, and certainly not as close as Harvard and MIT. But currently, it's like they're on different planets. We're not getting any of the benefits of these two world-leading universities being so close together. And most certainly, the towns and cities in between aren't joined up with them at all, and they're not getting any benefit either. And herein lies the purpose of East West Rail. It's not about building a railway. It's about having a once-in-a-generation opportunity to connect people and businesses between Oxford and Cambridge, along with the towns and cities in between. It's replacing the old varsity line, which was decommissioned in the 60s, with a new direct rail line. It's not the trains themselves that are important. It's what the trains do. Our purpose is to unlock the full potential of this region that is vital to keeping the UK globally competitive in a way that considers the environment and offers value for taxpayers. What does this mean in practice? This moves us on to scope. What is the thing that we're delivering? What does it need to do? Let's start with the railway service itself. This is a commuter railway, and it's a commuter railway that needs to work. We know that people make life decisions based on how they're going to travel to their jobs and schools and to see friends and family. Are you going to move somewhere if you're faced with 2 hours stuck in traffic on your morning drive to work? Are you going to move somewhere if you think that you'll constantly miss the nursery pickup because your train was canceled? Are you going to take that exciting new job if you can't afford to live anywhere near it? We need our railway to be trusted by our customers the first day that it opens. It doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't even need to be that fast, but it needs to be incredibly predictable and be able to be maintained and operated cost effectively. This vision of our railway directly impacts our scope decisions. And in my East West Railway company, it means that we are only going to do what is strictly necessary to achieve this reliable commuter railway so that we can deliver our benefits sooner for the customers. But it's not just the railway that matters. It's the places that are going to be developed around our railway stations and the door-to-door connectivity that matter. Now, this is pretty controversial in certain parts of government because it looks like East West Railway Company is overreaching our remit. But again, this is the purpose. If we are really going to achieve the growth potential of the region between Oxford and Cambridge, we need to be making sure that the railway we're designing is absolutely aligned to the placemaking around our stations, and the people who live more than just a 2-minute walk from the station can get there easily and quickly. Is this going beyond our remit to deliver a new railway? Maybe. Does it go beyond our remit to unlock economic growth between Oxford and Cambridge? Absolutely not. If we don't deliver these places and have good and integrated ways for people to get to our stations, what really is the purpose of building this railway? It's not the railway that matters, but what the railway enables. We need to make sure that every aspect of our purpose is brought to life, or it won't have been worth the cost, time, and environmental impact of building this railway. The way that I bring this into the management of the company is that we make decisions on scope based on this purpose. There is a danger as engineers and designers that we sit apart from the end users and we don't understand their lives, their interaction with what we're building, and that we don't notice the world around us is changing. Or we can be pulled into the change and get wrapped up in complexity so we forget our core purpose. Having a clear purpose to use as a lens for all strategic decisions is vital. Some people also appear to wear the size or length of the project as a badge of honor. As leaders, we need to change this mindset. Our goal should be to finish a project as quickly as possible whilst meeting our aims. Although I'm not an engineer, I know how difficult it is for engineers not to build the biggest and best thing. But biggest and best isn't the point. Fulfilling our purpose is our point. So let's go back for a minute to what makes a mega project. Is it really pound, dollar, euro value? Or is it something else? I think that what makes something a mega project is politics. How visible is your project to the general public? How much impact are you going to have on their lives? Is someone going to write a letter to their MP or councillor about your project? Will your project be on television? Is anyone going to troll you on social media because of who you work for? No matter where you are in the world, mega projects are inherently political. And managing your politics is what I think is a critical element between success and the mega project norm of cost overruns and delay. You absolutely need to get your stakeholders on board the whole time. You cannot rely on getting them on board once. These projects take a long time, so you need your political stakeholders, or at least a very large majority of your political stakeholders, to be on board throughout, across all the political parties at national and local level and within your communities. Who stakeholders are and how you do this will vary from geography to geography, but the principles of engagement are the same, and I would bet the overarching challenge is the same also. The key challenge is really about understanding people and embracing collaboration across a spectrum of stakeholders. It makes it much easier to engage with the politics if you have a clear purpose. You might disagree with your stakeholders about whether or not your purpose is desirable. And believe me, we absolutely know for the homeowners we talk to, who might have to move house to allow us to build the railway, that they are not enthusiastic about unlocking sustainable growth between Oxford and Cambridge. But the rest of your communities will need to support your purpose for the duration of the project. At East West Rail, we're fortunate that local communities, councils, and businesses have been calling for a better transport solution between Oxford and Cambridge for over 20 years. 71% of the population agree that it's a good thing. But I've got a video here to show you what our stakeholders think. Juliana, could you roll that for me, please?
Very welcome announcements in the was the government's recommitment to the next stage of East West Rail, which goes through my constituency, and when fully opened will create a really important rail transport link connecting Oxford, Milton Keynes, Bedford and Cambridge. And it's not just a transport link, it will help unlock enormous economic developments in the area.
A project that delivers exactly what the UK economy needs right now, which is growth. The Oxcam arm is competing against global counterparts. In order to win that competition, it needs investment. In order to secure that investment, boardrooms across the globe are looking to make sure that the right infrastructure is in place. That's why East West Rail is such an important infrastructure project to get completed.
There's a huge demand for talent, especially I think across Oxford and into Cambridge. I see it as a great opportunity for the talent pool being expanded across a much wider area.
There's a lot of talent that is in this region, and the communication between them is difficult at the moment.
Rail, as well as good public transport, are critical components of connecting the people where they live with the businesses that they occupy, making connections between businesses here in Oxfordshire, perhaps in the north of England, or in this case, across to the east. The benefit of improved connectivity through East-West Rail will be to open up market opportunities and, importantly, to connect our workforce back into Oxfordshire. We have significant opportunities to grow those businesses, but connectivity is often a constraint.
We have a number of key areas of innovation here at the Science Park, whether it's development of battery technology or satellites or quantum or energy. And of course, all of those topics require collaboration between organisations.
So there's significant work going on between Oxford, Milton Keynes and Cambridge, but it's constrained by the fact that we can't easily move people across that corridor.
It is very important for the industry to have railway projects like East-West Rail being delivered with certainty and enthusiasm. The supply chain can only innovate if they have a visibility of what's coming up and just clear pipeline of work where they can develop their skills, work with the projects together, and develop these solutions for future passengers.
We ultimately had to change trains 3 times to get here, and it was just such an unexpectedly long journey, especially given how far apart the cities are. It really makes very little sense.
My sister's in Oxford. She doesn't come to visit Cambridge very often. It's not a pleasant drive. I don't think anyone thinks that driving to Cambridge is nice. I mean, it would make our lives easier if we, could go and see your family more.
So I work daily in Milton Keynes. So I think a faster service would make it more reliable. The wider population would have more options to direct link, faster, more convenient for passengers.
We've noticed the difference of the cost of living crisis. It really has reduced people's spending, but I think an increase in transport would definitely increase more people into the area.
Train would be much better than the bus, or driving definitely, because parking and the motorways are horrendous now.
If I'd have got the train from Oxford to Cambridge today, I could have worked on my laptop and it might have been more comfortable. It would have been more direct, and it also has better impact for the environment.
And there's far more traffic on the road now, so the rail link will be brilliant.
Thanks, Giuliano. You can see that we have support from a wide array of stakeholders, but there's no room for complacency. Although our railway only covers 90 miles, this crosses 4 counties, 35 local authorities, travels between rural and urban areas, and has the potential to touch the lives of 5 million people. We have to constantly be working to gain and maintain their support. We can't take it for granted for a mega project duration. What I want is for all 5 million people across the region to be asking their political leaders when their railway is coming. As a leader, you should want everyone to want your project to happen, because there are always competing projects. In the public sector, there are always other calls on the public purse, and there are really legitimate alternatives. Around the world, nurses and teachers need to be paid more. You should always be considering whether or not you can justify your project when competing with paying nurses and teachers more. So how do you fill up this bank of goodwill? What do you need to do to continue to get support across your community? This is about listening, understanding what the challenges are in your communities and what answers your project is going to have to these challenges. And this is obviously not a single answer. We need to listen and use our brains. We need to engage with our communities constantly. We need to make sure that all political parties want our project, whether they are in power or in opposition. And we need our local authorities to support our projects, as well as our national governments. Now, I want to move on to political risk. What are the aspects of politics that really get in the way of delivering our mega projects? Change and reviews. Even if you have this bank of goodwill filled to the brim, you still risk 2 big things. Politicians and civil servants trying to change the scope of your project to find a better solution that suits their own interests better than the current scheme. And the dreaded review, which deflects the focus of getting the scheme done onto assessing whether or not it should be done, it's the right scheme, and its value for money. Let's start with the review. particularly when you spend taxpayers' money, but even when it's private sector shareholders and investors, it's absolutely fit and proper that you have a third-party review of what you're doing. Personally, I love a well-focused internal audit, as if you focus it the right way, as a leader, you're giving yourself evidence that your team is doing the right thing. And if they're a bit off track, you can use these reviews to get them back on the right track. And most certainly, as a taxpayer, I want to know that my tax money is being spent efficiently. So having a national audit review, well-structured and scheduled, is very welcome to me. But it's the political review that's dangerous and starts to risk your project delivery. Is the scope right? Are your contracts right? When these questions start getting asked midway through a project, you can be certain that cost and program are going to go up. And worse than reviews is the political scope change. This is a massive political risk. No politician wants a scheme to have a negative impact on a single one of their constituents. And very few civil servants want to support a project that is bold, meaning that you've had to take a risk-based decision. Unfortunately, these are the realities of major and mega projects. You have to make choices in order to deliver anything, and it's highly unlikely that every single constituent will be 100% happy with your decision. So how do you avoid these political challenges? You need to anticipate that these are likely to happen and then plan for them. It starts with sticking with your purpose and making your decisions based on that purpose. It continues with laying out your intent. What are your values and how are you going to deliver your purpose against them? And then when you're making your decisions, you need to ensure that you are building a coalition that understands why you've made these decisions and that it may not be a perfect solution, but a balanced decision that will be the best solution for delivering your purpose. For me, the most important thing in managing political change is to continue to reinforce that these benefits that you're delivering through your purpose will come soonest if you don't make change. This is not easy, but I think that we need to do more collectively to reinforce that delivering a mega project quicker, even if it's not perfect, is the best way to deliver our objectives and value for money. So how are we going to get this done? We're clear on why we're building, and we're carefully managing the politics. What's the plan? Obviously, when you're delivering a mega project, program and project management capability is critically important. Controlling programs and costs are what we're meant to be doing. You need to have very detailed plans, and it needs to be written down and detailed and not in anyone's head. In fact, the act of planning needs to be seen as important as the work itself, because the logic needed to think through how things will be delivered, each individual step and the logic between them needs to be worked, and not just by the planners, but by the whole team, the whole of the team. Way back when I worked at London Underground, I was working with an amazing project director who was responsible for the power upgrade for the Victoria Line. We had a consortium of three contractors, and their approach to providing an integrated program was to take their 3 individual programs and staple them together and give them to us. This project director did not accept this as remotely integrated, and she made them go back and integrate all of the work. Lo and behold, this project came in on time and on budget. The old adage of measure twice and cut once should be deployed as part of planning, and not just in the construction phase, but all the way through at the beginning and for all of your activities. The front end is probably actually harder to plan. It's much easier to assess the production rate of a tunnel boring machine than it is to determine how long a governmental approval process or the development of a bespoke transport model is going to take. But it is critical to plan out each of your activities and the steps necessary to complete these from the start to the finish of your project. Beyond the obvious, there are a couple of really important reasons why we need to go into the detail, even at the front end. First, it's about developing resource-loaded programs. We all have limited access to people, particularly in the early phase of a mega project. So we need to know when we need which experts, and if we're overloading some of our people at particular points in time. Mega projects are a marathon rather than a sprint, and whilst we can all be heroic from time to time, it's unsustainable to ask people to constantly do weekend and evening shifts. At East West Rail, we've implemented a workforce planning tool that allows us to see where we need different types of capability, a lot like what our contractor partners do to manage their resources. This will allow us to identify where we need to hire or augment our capability rather than using gut feel or what we did on the last project in terms of recruiting our teams. The other reason that detailed plans are critical goes back to the politics. When those external factors change, there's an election, or the politicians want you to go faster so you can deliver the ribbon cutting ceremony in time for the next election, having all of your activities detailed out will allow you the ability to flex the program when necessary. Having the detail on a program is how you can identify your risks as well. Understand where you need to be creative and problem solve and adapt to change. Planning really is the lifeblood of any mega project. Once we have a plan, we need to make sure we have a team to deliver it. I want to come back to why we build infrastructure. It's for people. Infrastructure exists to serve society. It doesn't have a point without what it does for people. Too often as an industry, we just think about the thing rather than why we're doing it. If we start again with our purpose, making sure that our purpose aligns to what our communities needs, it helps us achieve the political support that we need to proceed with our project through its whole life. As much as many of us would like to think that our mega projects are about earth movements and concrete and steel and complicated systems, the whole ecosystem of the mega project is made up of people, and it's people who will deliver the success or the failure of our mega projects. So let's start at the top. Very often, the size and scale of our mega projects means that we seek superhumans to run them because we think that only the superhumans can deliver these huge projects. We're looking for your run-of-the-mill Elon Musk type. We want these Elon Musk types leading our client organizations and leading our supply chain partners. We usually organize our teams around these superhumans. And then when we try to replace a superhuman when he, and it's almost always a he, has moved on to a bigger project, we realize that it's impossible to run the structure without another superhuman in post. Elon Musk's, and probably even more so, those aspiring to be Elon Musk's, tend to want to deliver very big things to demonstrate their importance. So there is a risk the mega project gets even bigger. Then there's what I describe as major projects culture. I'm not ever very kind when I'm talking about major projects culture, because what I've seen across many of the projects that I've worked on is a certain amount of resignation. It'll cost what it costs. The client has asked for this, so we'll hire some people to deliver that. I believe that this exists because teams have lost sight of the purpose of their project and its impact on the planet. They are either going back to doing the biggest thing people can come up with or are ticking boxes just because the client has asked. And this leads to it'll cost what it costs culture, where we see costs overrunning massively and huge delays. Neither requiring superhumans to deliver your project, nor it'll cost what it costs, is okay. This leads to bigger projects than we need to deliver our outcomes, and therefore likely cost overruns and delays. We need to do things that are different. And with our climate emergency, we can't accept it's going to cost what it's going to cost because we must be doing less. We need to move away from the testosterone-driven, massive egos that want to make things as big as possible and find ways to work collaboratively in teams to deliver the outcomes for much less. At East West Rail, our values are better, cheaper, quicker, greener, and safe and secure. And I'm really happy to say that these have been around since before I joined. But what I bring to East West Rail is the challenge to do less to deliver our outcomes. How do we move less earth and pour less concrete? How do we minimize our specs so that we're delivering just that commuter railway and no more? How do we work with our local authority partners to deliver some of their nature objectives with our biodiversity net gain commitments? How do we make sure that we're thinking through our station design to reflect local needs and not over-designing? I won't lie and say that this is easy and that people like me asking these questions. In fact, I think they often wish that I would just let them get on with things and deliver in a traditional way. We work in an industry where people know that we need change and say that we need to change, but when faced with actual change, they don't like the change or it's too much change. I'm trying to change our corporate and supply chain culture so that different ideas are welcomed and debated and discussed, and once adopted, not changed. I often say that diversity and inclusion is hard and that we shouldn't pretend that it isn't. Groupthink is easy, but it often leads to bad outcomes. So I want to do that hard work to incorporate the different ideas so that we can come up with the right outcomes. In October last year, we had a trackathon where we brought together an array of different companies who aren't normally engaged with client organizations and certainly not this far in advance of awarding contracts. We found that these companies, especially when they engaged with each other, were coming up with different ideas, especially in the sustainability space. We'll be doing more to create these kinds of opportunities over the coming years so that we can continue to challenge the norm. Before I close, I want to talk about how we must engage with our communities. This is obviously linked to purpose, but we must always think about the people who will be affected by our project. Both the people who might have to move house to build our railway lines, as well as the people whose lives will be made materially better because we've delivered our project. I think this is the hardest bit because it's emotional. Our mega projects impact people's lives, their homes, where their kids go to school, or where they want to retire. For those of you familiar with London mega projects, the now paused Crossrail 2 route was planned to run on the railway line at the end of my road. When a consultation event was scheduled locally, a local WhatsApp group was formed, and of course, people were irate. To refresh my memory, I looked up the group in my phone, and the group name was Save Wimbledon from CR2. Not exactly warm and welcoming, despite the fact that so many of us would have benefited from the easier and quicker journeys that it would bring. I know the Crossrail 2 managing director, so I sent her a note at the time that she was going to have a community problem on her hands if they didn't deal with it soon. She wasn't that keen to engage or to send anyone along to the local event the council had planned, but she did have someone in the team call me. I explained why my friends were worried, why they didn't understand the consultation materials and the risks that Crossrail 2 were facing in this community. They proceeded to tell me that the local shopping center, where many of our local primary schools sing their Christmas carols every year, will be closed for 6 years, but return to its previous state after that. This is not a good example of how we should be engaging with our communities. And it highlights how important it is to listen to what happens in our communities. First of all, we have a responsibility to make sure that the information we're providing is clear enough that non-experts can understand it. Using jargon only confuses people and worries them even more. We must speak to people as often as we can. However much communication that we have with our communities is never enough for them, so do more. At East West Rail, even before we started our statutory processes, we have had 2 non-statutory consultations and several rounds of community events. We've developed a series of quarterly meetings for 9 local representative groups across the region that bring together diverse groups of people from the local area. And those conversations aren't just us transmitting information, although we do share new information when we have it. They're about listening to these groups and the issues that concern them. Not just about our project, but about their wider issues, like the environment and traffic and potential disruption, so that we can use East West Rail to mitigate rather than exacerbate their concerns. And we must not be afraid to engage with people who disagree with us. This is really hard. I've had someone ask me how I could sleep at night because he didn't agree with our project. Personally, I find this all really emotional. But we need to put ourselves in the shoes of the people that we are impacting and understand their challenges and concerns so that we can help mitigate the stress and pain that they're going through. This is often a big policy challenge in the UK, as no one likes to spend money in advance of project certainty. But if I could wave my magic policy wand, I would ensure that for all projects, early solutions can be found and paid for to minimize the stress that we put individual families under through the long process of building a mega project. We owe this to our communities, and I would urge all of you to find ways to resolve the issues of those impacted as early as possible in your project. So to conclude, for mega project success, we need to have a clear and strong purpose, and this needs to be the North Star for your decision-making. Deliver that purpose with less. We're having a climate emergency. The era of bigger being better must be over, and we need to deliver our purpose with the least impact on our planet. Build consensus and goodwill all the time. You need political support for a very long time and from very many people. So work hard all the time to earn the support. Everyone needs to take part in planning your program. It's not the responsibility of just the planners. the whole team needs to treat planning as a part of doing, to get the logic of what they'll be delivering right before they start doing it. And it's all about the people who deliver the projects, who need to think differently to deliver those outcomes, and the people who are impacted by our projects and those who benefit from our projects. Thank you so much for giving me the soapbox today. I hope that this has spurred you on to think about things through a slightly different lens. And if you'd like to find out more about our projects, please do get in touch. We're always on the lookout for new people with interesting ideas. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Beth, for a fantastic keynote on leadership, politics, purpose, and people, putting people at the heart of Megaproject success. So we have several questions coming in, and if you have more, please do send them through the Q&A function. I think where we want to start this conversation is very much on this continuous engagement that you highlighted. It's not a snapshot of Megaproject leaders or the client organization engaging with external environment, if you will. And I wonder if you could highlight some of the practices or the lessons that clients can take forward on that engagement in a continuous manner. So what does it mean to engage and to maintain that capability in different phases of the project?
It's a great question, and I think it's the engagement has to have multiple levels. So I come from a commercial background. When I was HS2, for example, when I was at the underground, we did loads of engagement with our supply chain. That's something that's ongoing. With communities and politicians, it's having a drumbeat. It's having, it's going and having a regular cycle of engagement that you're committing to, being able to tell people in advance when you're going to have those events. It's just one of these relentless things that you have to keep going and not losing momentum on, even though, it's like that whole thing of you feel bored because you're telling people stuff many, many, many times, but things don't sink in until you've been able to communicate with people. And I think the other thing is that it has to be more than just that transmit thing. You have to be listening to, and then reacting to things and being able to demonstrate that you've taken those considerations into account. I've long been saying how much I hate a bunch of consultation boards in a town hall, because that's not a consultation. It's you telling people what you're going to do, asking them to say whether or not you like it, and doing what they want. Doing what you want anyway. That's not a consultation. That's a transmission and a box ticking exercise. You have to be able to build credibility with your communities, again, on a regular ongoing basis, to say, well, we've heard what you've said and this is what we're doing about it. It's a lot of a you said we did kind of thing as well, because otherwise you're just talking at each other. And so you need to be able to demonstrate that you're listening and absorbing and doing things, and just, keep going. People change, politicians change, people move house. You just have to keep engaging all the time. And it's hard work. And you need a good team of people who enjoy that work as well, because, it is so hard. You don't want to force people to be going out and constantly engaging when it's not something they do. I've got people on the team that I watch in community events, and I'm just amazed at how much they enjoy it. Despite the fact they've got people come shouting at them, they're calm, they're collected, they're and they're factually giving huge amounts of information to people. So having the right team, and then just and it's not just in this development phase; it's going to be all the way through construction.
Perfect. And I think you highlighted very much the idea of maintaining or stabilizing purpose and maintaining that over design. And we have several questions here on this battle between purpose and design, and how do you prioritize that? I wonder if you could share some of the lessons or some of the challenges and the actions that clients might do to maintain that purpose and avoid perhaps the political interference that might change the design.
And I think I think part of it is just it is having the bold question, being able to be bold enough to say, this is why we're doing it. Have we changed the, there's a first question on that, which is, have we changed the purpose? Has the purpose shifted? And being able to really honestly have that conversation. For something that's got a really long duration, sometimes the purpose does shift. Is the purpose still viable so as you've gone through that transition, and is it adaptable to changing circumstances? And I know there are a couple of questions about HS2, and I'm not taking a pop at HS2, I promise, but I think it is something that I've observed across many projects. It's do we know why we're doing this? how you bring that into design is, I think that, again, I think we need to be asking ourselves, are things necessary when we're designing them? And looking at outcomes. I probably haven't said that word enough. It's an outcome base rather than what are inputs or outputs. And there are different ways to deliver outcomes. And I like to use the idea of just a roundabout, a traffic roundabout. Often you'll get into a situation where you go to a local authority, and again, I'm not taking up with local authorities, but you've got a traffic problem, and someone says, "Oh, we're going to build a roundabout." But there are lots of other ways to solve a traffic problem than building a roundabout. You could just put a stoplight in, a crossing. It's what's the problem you're trying to solve, and is that design solution actually the one that it might be the one you think is the right one, but how do you do the analysis to make sure that the design you're coming up with is delivering the outcomes that you want? And I think that's the challenge you have to bring in. It's not just it's what I think is the right thing to do, but is this the most cost effective, or does it have the most benefits for the outcomes that I'm trying to achieve?
Perfect. And that leads us very nicely to some of the other end of the scales. We're talking about design and engineers and technical professionals who are excited about complex problems and how do we create solutions to tackle that. And they often move from project to project to get that next challenge in terms of complexity and the technical element of it. However, there is enough evidence out there and research suggesting that political interference leading to scope changes coming top down from politicians, from the sponsor, whatever, that causes significant delay and cost overruns. And sometimes the client is taking the blame for political interference. So one of the very interesting conversations going on is how perhaps mega project leaders can create a bubble or shield to the extent that is possible the client organization from political interference. And I wonder how to maintain the purpose with politicians in that sense, not so much with engineers.
So, I think it goes back to what's your relationship with the politicians to begin with, and do they agree with your purpose? Because I think that there can be a disconnect about why you're doing this, and lots of countries have lots of politicians who who enjoy building mega projects because it's their legacy. And if you've got a change in political leadership, you have to go back to, is the legacy project that somebody was trying to build, and the various other things come to mind outside of the UK. It's going back to saying, well, is that purpose still valid? Because we tend to never think about sunk costs. It's like, oh, we spent this money, we must carry on. But if the political leadership has changed, does the political leadership still buy into that purpose? Is it something that's still their policy? And I think this is why it's really important to engage with the politicians who are in opposition as well as in government, because our projects are so long, you want to have that consistency irrespective of what election results end up as. But again, it's getting the politicians to believe in the purpose and be able to tell you back what it's going to be. And I think that's how you can have then a robust conversation if they do try to change scope, because they've already bought into the top level reason for doing it. And then it's essentially a leadership question about, are you willing to go and have a challenging conversation with a politician?
I think that's a fantastic point. And then we saw some recent mega projects in the UK and also globally losing the public relations battle. And we have very interesting questions on that. I wonder, in that sense of communicating, so you just mentioned several electoral cycles and different political agendas and so on. If that changes so much over 10, 20, 30 years, that shielding the organization principles seems to be quite key to maintain stability in terms of cost and outcome as well. And I guess the question coming from the audience is very much on the public relations angle, and that's not a capability that's often highlighted in mega projects. Is much more on the technical complexity. So I wonder your thoughts, coming from a non-engineering background as you highlighted, how could clients build that capability over time?
I think you have to acknowledge you need it in the first instance, and you need strategy people, and you need to have people who are going to talk with communities and the media. But often I think it's making sure you're pitching it at all the levels as well. You know, you need a rich array of capability, because what happens is that often politicians don't get bothered unless they get a letter or 30 letters or 100 letters. So, you know, how you influence the political debate at a national level or at in a local authority level is going to be based on what their constituents are shouting at them about. And your constituents don't normally shout about things that they like. You know, so what you need to be doing is figuring out how communities are impacted by what you're doing. And either, again, this is where I get into waving my magical policy wand. If you can find ways to mitigate pain that individuals are having, you're onto a good space. But I think it's going back to how do you build that capability. It's recognizing you need it at multiple levels. There are multiple different actors, and you've got, you know, multiple different groups of people that you have to engage with, and having sufficient resource to be able to do that. And I think, you know, different companies will do it in different ways. I think it's really important that they're employees of the company in many instances, because then it's, you know, you are representing, you've got the business card, and you're representing the views of the company, rather than it being somebody you're hiring from outside. So there's a representation point as well, is that you need to be demonstrating that you are there on behalf, you know, you're there from the company, not the agent, the person over there who, you know, may be seen more skeptically as well.
Excellent. And I guess the leadership challenge that you also highlighted from different backgrounds and bringing a diverse angle to avoid groupthink and the same again, and what did we do last time? That's something that was really highlighted here in different ways by questions. And I wonder, I guess the question coming is leadership from a CEO, top leader, top management team, board director perspective. Is it different from a more technical program director perspective? But we tend to promote people based on technical excellence to do a job that is perhaps not technical, is to deal with the political environment. So I wonder, how do we perhaps build the next generation of leaders in that space, and how do they perhaps evolve, your thoughts, over the life cycle of the project? Do we need leaders at different points of the project?
I think it's a great point, and I've long, I mean, the reason I got involved in infrastructure to begin with is not because I had that engineering interest, but it's because of what infrastructure does for people. And I think we downplay that in the way we recruit people into the industry, and we tend to forget that there are loads of people who do commercial activities, finance activities, who work in HR. You know, there are loads of other people who are working in the industry that aren't project managers or engineers, and they have important roles to play as well. But we tend to think that in the way in which we promote people is that it's only the engineers and the program directors that rise to the top, rather than people who are coming from different backgrounds. And I think we should give a fair shout to people who are coming from different backgrounds, because they are, you know, they could be the best leaders, and they can, you know, they will have domain knowledge. You know, if you work in infrastructure for, you know, 20 or 30 years, you're going to know stuff about infrastructure, even if you're not a program, you know, even if you're not an engineer or a program director, you know stuff. And you're able, if you're a good leader, you should be able to lead a group of people with diverse backgrounds. And it is critically important that you have amazing engineers and amazing program directors. It's very, very important. But I think it's about how do you make sure you get the right balance of skills across your leadership team, so that you can have those diverse conversations, and you can think about, what does my customer think, or what are the stakeholders going to think? How is the stakeholder going to care about that particular bit of design? And what you want to make sure is that the voices that are representing your I'll come back to stakeholders, are influencing the design, because it's easy just to think about the design in isolation. It's not as easy to think about the design when you're thinking about, how do I not really make my stakeholders angry, or how do I make sure I design this in a way? I'll give you a good example. There's a road bridge north of Bedford Station that was just closed a couple of years ago. It completely clogged up the town, because it's a critical junction that goes across the railway. If we shut it again for 2 years, we will probably have some sort of riot in Bedford. So it's sort of, how do we find a design solution? If we have to replace that bridge, how do we find a design solution that will shut that bridge for as short as possible, you know, time as we can? Can we build it in a space next to it and crane it in over the weekend. You know, that's the dream, because we're thinking about our stakeholders, not, oh, we'll just build it in the traditional way. And that's the kind of discussion that needs to be brought to how we build the whole thing, because keeping that support and not having, you know, thousands of people up in arms because we've clogged up the town center for 2 years. That's how you continue to win the support of your communities, is you've thought through how this thing impacts them. And you need to have those voices at the table with your designers and your project engineers or your project directors to make sure you're getting those answers.
That's excellent. We have a lot coming here on planning, and it takes too long. Perhaps we could simplify, and it's constraining the UK and many countries actually in delivering infrastructure and providing the outcome to communities. So I wonder your thoughts on navigating that planning system, and perhaps a few action points that the industry could get together and argue with government for a change in policy that would really make a difference. Very easy question, but
yeah, no, it's totally easy. No, I've been saying that we're in the zeitgeist of everybody hating the planning process right now across the political spectrum. So how do we use that to our advantage? And there's a challenge, I think, in planning, no matter what it is. So from doing your kitchen extension kind of planning to building a massive infrastructure project, and the challenge is that nobody wants to spend any money until they've got the planning, until you got your planning permission. But there are loads of things you need to think about before you get your planning permission. And so you're trying to strike this balance between doing as little as possible and knowing what the detail is going to be, even if it's not certain you're going to get permission. And the big challenge, I think, for nationally significant infrastructure projects, or these big mega projects, is that you've got lots of people who are going to object to the scheme, and so you have to provide far more detail than you want to provide necessarily, because you haven't engaged your supply chain, or you haven't really got into the detail of how you're going to build something. But you have to get into all this detail, so you spend all this money and you do all this work and you spend all this time, and it keeps elongating out the process. So I think that there is something that we could probably learn and do more work looking at jurisdictions around the world about how do we manage and how do we balance something that is important and nationally significant with the level of detail that we have to put in various stages of the planning process. And I know there was a complaint about Lower Thames Crossing in the media last week about how many, thousands of pages were involved, and the system has required that. But I think it's that question of how do we require less information to get to the same outcome, doing less to get to the same outcomes, and what are the ways in which we can look at either taking more risk or not taking more risk, doing things with contingencies or options through the process, so we can speed it up. I mean, it's become an incredibly lengthy process in the UK, because we're trying to shut down all possible risks as we go through the planning process. And it costs a huge amount of money to go through this process. And it puts a lot of delay into the process. So I think that there might be some ways to how do we scale back what we're trying to do, and how do we do less at this front end, but do enough to be able to give communities an understanding of what's going to happen.
Brilliant. We have, recognizing your background perhaps in commercial and procurement and so on, we have a few questions on procurement naturally, and I wonder your reflections on the role of procurement in different phases. I know you are now in development, and you're leading, perhaps a collection of consultancy firms and advisors rather than contractors in delivery. But I wonder how you see procurement perhaps helping to reduce this complexity and perhaps shorten the life cycle of projects and planning.
So, I mean, I think I would say this, wouldn't I? Procurement is incredibly important, and I think we don't spend enough time thinking through our supply chain. We kind of it's sort of a mechanical process rather than being viewed as necessarily a value-adding process. And so I think we do need to recognize the importance of the procurement process and the contracts that we've got. And the most important thing is we have partners that are right for the job. And there are lots of amazing companies that exist, but not every company is right in working on every single project. So what's really important is how do we find a way through the procurement process to find the right partners, and they have to be partners, to deliver these big projects. So part of it's going to be recognizing what the supply chain actually, what is the capability of the supply chain, rather, what in real life rather than what we want it to be, and designing a contractual structure and an overall supply chain structure to reflect that reality, and then making sure that the whole organization on both sides is set up to deliver in the way that the contractual arrangement has been set up. I think too often we set up a contractual relationship and then our internal organization isn't fit for purpose to deliver that. And so the whole thing end to end needs to work together so that you don't have a massive client organization and a massive bunch of suppliers, and then you've got all kinds of man marking and people trying to find things to do. So that your client organization needs to reflect how you're setting up your contracts and the nature of the contracts you're establishing, and they need to work together. And we need to, I think one of the unsung things that we don't talk about very often is the move from procurement into actual delivery. And very often you've got a bid team and a procurement team who are doing their thing over here. You win, you select, you pick your winner, and then both the procurement team and the bid team go away, and an entirely new group of people show up that have no memory of, because they weren't involved in the procurement process. So that mobilization process is critically important to get that right. It's sort of how do you move from the bid team, the procurement team, into that delivery team, and does everybody know about what was discussed in that process, and does everybody agree that what was what was bid is actually how we're going to deliver? So there's a huge continuum that needs to be thought through as well on both sides of a contractual arrangement, and making sure that what you said you're going to do is what you're going to do, and that you're set up to do that. You're set up on both organizations, or all the organizations, to as you went through the procurement process. So you need that consistency all the way through.
Fantastic. So I think we are approaching the end of our Is a Lot Together. And I think one of the threads that you highlighted across many of your answers was collaboration. How do you set your client organization to collaborate? How do you procure to collaborate? And I wonder, given the very adversarial type of relationship that we have in the UK and many supply chain structures between clients and many contractors, and the layered approach of the supply chain as well, I wonder your thoughts on perhaps leadership teams to collaborate. Sometimes we have, as you said, procurement models that set up collaboration agreements, but we don't have the personalities or the composition of the team to lead and drive that collaboration. They are a bit more adversarial. They come from a different background. So I wonder how those two things could be reconciled. So the formation of teams to lead that collaboration, if you wish to put in place contractual arrangements in that sense.
I will have my very short and cheeky answer, which is as to bringing more women into the industry. I'll leave that there. But I think there are a couple of things, and one goes back to the superhuman point. And I think that we try to find all characteristics of a single human being to do stuff. And I think we need to recognize, especially in these complex projects, that all the characteristics we want probably don't exist in a single human being. You need to have a team of people who can do 3 or 4 bits, and they have to work together as a team. And there are loads of ways, high-performing teams is a well-known thing. That team needs to work together. And often you are taking people out of space where they're not used to collaborating, and you've got to figure out if they can do it, and if they can do it, how is it going to work? So, and I think this holds true across the board. And I think we can't shy away from the fact that these are complex things, and they need multiple people to deliver it. And then it's lots of people play sports. You figure out how, sports analogies I think are really good in the space, not least because I can make, again, gendered comments, but, sport, you learn a lot from sports about how do you play, and people have roles in the team, and you need to respect everybody else's role and recognize that sometimes you might have to, if you're a right back, you might have to go up the field and try to become a winger for a part of the game, but you still have a role and you're still playing part of the team. And if you're putting the cross in, that's how the goal might be going in, because that's your role. And I think, again, it shouldn't be difficult. I mean, if you think about it from a sporting analogy, it's what we do all the time. So if we recognize it's complex and it's not a single, it's not a single team player, it's not just one person's job, but recognize that that is what we need to do. We need to collaborate and treat it like a sports team. Maybe we can think about it in that's how we win. You win as a team. You don't win as an individual. I think I like to tell my boys that many years ago, the US played England in the World Cup, and the capability on the US team was not nearly as good as the individuals of England, but they were playing really well. And I said that, you need to recognize that three things were going on. They worked hard. The Americans worked hard. They played as a team and they listened to their manager. And, those things together make a really, really good team. But playing as a team is critically important. None of us can deliver any of these projects on our own.
Brilliant. I wonder if I could ask your message for a transformation in the industry, and recognizing you're coming from a different background, you're emphasizing diversity, women in leadership. So I really want to capture your thoughts on how could we be really ambitious? How could we, in different institutions at UCL, at IPMA, how could we help to make that transformation happen, and what we should be doing?
I think we just have to always ask ourselves why we're doing stuff. Like, why are we building? What is the purpose of why we're doing it? Because, again, I'll go back to, we're having a climate emergency. Not building, in a lot of circumstances, is a better outcome for the planet. So if we're going to be doing stuff, we need to know why we're doing it. And we have to keep asking ourselves over and over and over and over again, so that we're making sure that what it is that we're doing is right for the people we're doing it for and for the planet. So, I think we can't lose sight of that question. We should be constantly asking ourselves that, because it shouldn't be about our egos. It shouldn't be about, oh, I'm the biggest, best thing. It's about, what's the end game? Why are we doing this?
Fantastic. Well, on that note, can I thank you once again for making the time to join us and share your background, your experience, East-West Rail, and many, many insights on politics, purpose, and people. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
We hope the project will go well and be delivered as soon as possible to make that transformation between Oxford and Cambridge.
Thanks, Juliana. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today, and stay tuned for the next Megaproject CEO keynote. Have a nice day.